Hi everyone, welcome to today's episode of photosynthesis exam questions. I'm going to show you from start to finish how to think, approach, and answer the questions so that you can maximize the amount of marks you get. So let's begin. Read the question first. So it says, outline the importance of photosynthetic pigments in photosynthesis. Okay, it's an outline question, meaning you know the content. This is something you've learned in class, and you're just going to regurgitate it essentially. And this is why you need to memorize the content for this case. So, okay, the approach here is that you think, okay, we're talking about photosynthesis, great. We are talking about photosynthetic pigments. So now I would ask myself questions like, okay, what are the pigments? What happens to them? Are they within something? Do they do something? I'd be asking these questions and hopefully it will jog my memory of, the actual content linked to it. It says importance of the pigment. It doesn't really matter about the importance. If you were to just rephrase this question, it's like, tell me everything you know about photosynthetic pigments and photosynthesis. And so, I would talk about how the pigments absorb light and the electrons are raised to a higher energy level. I would also talk about how accessory pigments pass energy to the primary pigments. I might also talk about how it's for the light dependent reaction, and I would name it possibly saying that it's phosphorylation. There's so much that can be said here. Or another one might be that primary pigments become oxidized, e.g., they lose electrons to the electron transport chain. So again, that's just basically content. That's what I learnt in class, that's what the textbooks tell me, and so I just write it down. An easy 4 marks. Okay, next question says, suggest why chromista need pigments that are different from those of other photosynthetic organisms. Now, I don't know what that organism is, so I'm going to read the information because it is a suggest question. So it says that it lives in water here, and honestly, that's enough for me. As I said in my previous video, referring to the first video in the series, whenever it says lives in water, or it's an aquatic organism, or anything to that, similar to that, you basically say the same point. It says here, well, why does it need different pigments to other organisms? Well, very easy. You would just be like the point that some wavelengths of light don't reach the depths of water, and that's it. Because honestly, when you think about it logically, it makes sense. Some wavelengths just can't penetrate through oceans or water, and so that's why the chromista needs other pigments so that it can still have and absorb wavelengths of light to allow for photosynthesis to occur. Sorry, and yeah, that's bog standard answer. Okay, next question gives you a method, and then you have to explain why those precautions were included. So my technique or method to do this is just, I would say read the question, not read the question, but read the statement first, and then read the method, because then in that way you know what you're kind of looking for, and you can start to make reasons in your head. So here it says, hold the TLC plate carefully by the edges and avoid damaging the surface of the plate. Okay, so I'm going to read step 2, TLC analysis, and it says here, hold the TLC plate carefully by the edges, avoid damaging the surface of the plate. And if I were to continue reading it, it wouldn't really add anything to my thoughts, because here, right, when it says hold a TLC plate carefully, that is an important phrase, because you don't want your fingerprints to touch it. Now let's think why. TLC is all about pigments. We want a pure sample, and our fingerprints and our skin and our hands has oils, right? Has skin oils, And so imagine if you touch the plate, you touch that TLC plate, not by its size, but rather just straight on, that's going to contaminate it. And so in this case, the answer would be that, the plates aren't contaminated by fingerprints from your skin. Next point is make sure the plate does not touch the sides of the jar anywhere else. Here is very easy. I mean, to be honest, you don't even need to read this method, but in general, I would say read the method. But because TLC is such I would say a neat and logical, practical, that it's really not necessary. So why you don't want it to touch the sides of the jar? So imagine this. This is your jar, then this is your lid, and then this is your TLC plate. And now it's asking you, well, why don't you want this? Ooh, maybe that's not a good idea, but why do you not want it to look like that? So we have a TLC plate here touching this side, okay? And the logic behind it is that you don't want the solvent on the walls of the jar to affect the movement of the spots, because we can all agree that the reason why the pigments travel upwards, right, is because solvent is down below. And so if there's solvent on the wall, then doesn't that mean the pigment might travel that way? Possibly. So that's why the answer here would be, liquid on the walls of the jar may affect the movement of the spots, and thus you don't want it to touch the sides of the jar. And next question says, suggest an advantage of working as quickly as possible in step 1. Okay, what is step 1? It says, it's talking about the extraction of the pigment, and immediately I can see propanone is used, of course, as a solvent, and again we are also talking about pigments. And now from the knowledge and the content I have learnt, I know that pigments actually can get damaged. Yeah, they can get damaged, so that's one point. So you want to reduce the damage of it. But another most common answer will be the fact that you want to reduce the evaporation of propanone, as that is the solvent. Because the thing is, of course, it's a solvent, and so when you're doing the extraction of the pigment and you've got your solvent in your jar, and then you're trying to put the plate on, like submerge it in the water, if the solvent will evaporate to the air. And now you don't want that, do you? Because that just beats the point, and thus that's why it's important you work fast. Okay, and that concludes the rest of the video. Remember, the two most important exam techniques are read the question first and state all the obvious points. Now, over to you. Try some questions and let me know how it goes.